John Adams went back. We were speaking about John Adams earlier. He went back to Leiden when he was trying to raise money for the Revolutionary War. And he went back there and walked the streets of his ancestors and wept. And he went before the governments there and said, this story is your story. The American dream is your guys' story as well. And because of that, they helped fund the war, the Revolutionary War.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Solid. We're excited to be here with you today. We've got an episode that's maybe a little bit different than we've done in the past, but I think super important. We had an opportunity this past week to travel to Boston and to Plymouth and see a lot of the history out there. We had a business meeting for the first day and a half, and then it was kind of funny how it happened. So you can see here I've got my wife Lexee with me, as well as obviously our co-host Jeff Fieldstead. And Lexee's really one of her dream trips or vacations is to go to places of historical importance, right?
Yes.
Especially if it's American history, right? Religious history, church history, things like that. And so this was a great opportunity. We had a business meeting, and I was gonna take her for her birthday in the spring to Plymouth and do all this stuff we kind of did out there this last week. But it worked out where this meeting came up, and I said, hey, what if we go next week? This was a couple weeks ago. And so it was kind of a cool surprise, right?
Yes.
For all of us.
Yeah, it turned out to be a great trip.
Yeah, it did. It did. And then we were fortunate to have Jeff and Kelsey that Jeff and I are in business together, and then I just said, hey, you want to bring Kelsey and have her come as well. And unfortunately, she couldn't be here today. She's busy getting ready to travel up north today. Again. So we will miss her today because we need her input too, but that's okay. We'll get her on again for some of this stuff.
Yeah.
But I really I'm so grateful that I've got a wife who's got so much passion about history, American history, and just really, and then even just the gospel, right? Just anything that I would consider of most importance. She genuinely has a deep interest in that, and she's had that. I mean, growing up as a teenager, young adult, and obviously now it just continues to get more and more important to her, and she just delves into this stuff, and I love that because I probably wouldn't do that on my own.
Yeah, I'm probably the same way.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that, thankfully, because of her, I've paid more attention to, and feel like I'm more in tune with what really happened through history versus kind of what we're told from media or from, I guess, the current culture of things out there. So we wanted to talk about some of those things today. We're going to just get a little piece of it in today. There's no way we can cover everything that we learned out there. But our history is so important. And the only way to destroy a nation and destroy a country is to destroy its history.
Right.
And I think that's unfortunately being worked on very hard, in a big way right now. People are trying to convince us of things that didn't really happen. They're not very accurate about it. And, they're tearing down statues. They're saying different things about historical figures such as Christopher Columbus or maybe some of our founding fathers that just aren't true. And we're going to talk today a lot about the Pilgrims and how important they really were and are to every single one of us in this great country, our promised land we call the United States of America. Right. And so we wanted to kind of cover some of that stuff and talk about it today. So I don't know which one of you want to kind of maybe talk about a highlight to start off with. I think you can start with anything and we can talk about it. There's so many cool things.
Yeah, I would just like to say something as we get started that I was saying before we started recording is what really stood out to me is going on this, the couple of days we spent a lot of time doing tours. And in the process, we seen other tour guides, right? Yes. Well, in the meantime, I came home and then, of course, started opening up books and reading stuff that had been written just to compare what we had been told from our tour guides compared to what was in the books. And I started thinking, it's very interesting to me how someone can just leave out something or simply change the intention and how it changes the whole story. And I was telling you, Brandon, before that it kind of reminds me of if you're watching a football game, right? And let's say you're watching a Super Bowl, and I don't really care who it is, but let's say it's the Patriots versus the Seahawks, right? Let's say the Patriots win. They've got Tom Brady, and you've got a lifetime Seattle Seahawks fan in the stands watching the Super Bowl, and they lose, and then you listen to him tell the story versus a lifetime Tom Brady fan tell the story of the exact same game. And if both of those people told you the story of what happened that day, it could be totally different, right, than having an objective view of what really happened. And I think that what's happening in our country is we're having teachers and tour guides and people that are seeking out good information, but they're being maybe told from the guy who watched his team lose, or,
Right.
So it's weird to me. It's weird that it would be changed. I mean, I don't think it's intentional for some people, but I think it was intentional for other people that started down that road.
Yeah, our perception is our reality, and we all have our perception based on what we have experienced. So that's why it's so crucial to try to go back to actual journals of these people to try to do your best to find out what actually happened, not what we think happened or what we've been taught happened, but what actually happened. And that's what we found out a lot back there is there were journals written, firsthand experience that we were learning.
It also reminds me why it's so important we all have libraries.
Yep.
So many people don't have a library, and it's clear, like we went to John Adams' house, right? And seeing his library, he had an extra home just for his books, right? And how important it was for these men to learn and then pass on that knowledge as well. But I think it's just as important for us in modern day. And I think very rarely do you see somebody with a library like he had.
Yeah.
But it's important because how else do we go back and reference things, right? And not know whether or not it's been changed. Nobody knows whether a website's been changed or not.
Yeah,
right?
It's the difference between the tour guide saying, here's the room where John Adams passed away, to the actual story of probably.
So this is, I don't mean to cut you. I want you to talk about, I want you to tell this story.
Yes.
This is an example of why we don't know all the facts, right? So that's very true. The tour guide, good tour guide, park ranger, right? Mm-hmm. That's who does the tour guides at John Adams' house. Government employee.
Yep.
She did a good job.
Yep.
But she left some very important things out that I feel are mega important for people to hear when they do this tour for the benefit of our nation. So sorry, I just wanted to preface that.
No, that's okay. I was just, we had 2 days of great tour guides of people that I had looked up, studied, knew what we were going to get. And then we went to John Adams' home. It is by a park ranger, and that's just how it has to be. So I knew we weren't going to get the like nitty gritty spiritual, really important, like honestly, probably one of the greatest miracles in history happened in that room. And instead we got, this is where he passed away, and that's it. Instead of on his deathbed. So John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were the pen and the voice for the Declaration of Independence, like great friends, great men, went through all this together. And then they got a little bit into some spats when they were political rivals. They're running for president and different things. So they end up not speaking for many, many years. And then Benjamin Rush has a dream where he said, you two will, the end of the book of your guys' lives is you are friends again. So John Adams reaches out to Thomas Jefferson, and they start writing the last few years of their life. And the day that they pass away within 2 hours of each other on the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So July 4th, 1826, they pass away within hours of each other. And the story is told by John Quincy Adams, who I believe was the president at the time. I'm trying to think of the year, but I think because he was the 6th president, so I think he was.
Yeah, seems about right.
The president at the time wrote that it was raining all day long. And right when John Adams passed away, there was a clap of thunder, and this brilliant light shines through and lights up the whole room where John Adams passes away. So that's the story that I know. And then you go and you're told, not that, right? So think of the difference of that story and what that's done to me knowing that story versus his house. Incredible.
Yeah. What do you think is the reasoning? I mean, what do you think is like, why do you think they leave out important details like that? Do you think it's because maybe then you have a better opinion of those people?
Yes. I mean, obviously anyone I do think there is quite a mission to take out anything that's spiritual and maybe turn everything a little bit more secular, I guess, and nothing spiritual. Like maybe first out of respect for people so you don't make anyone uncomfortable with speaking of spiritual matters. But honestly, I think it's the adversary. I do believe that. I think those things are taken out to, like Brandon said, if you don't understand your history, it's going to affect your present and your future and what you teach passing on.
Yeah.
So
I feel like it almost humanizes people, and it's hard to hate somebody that you have empathy for, versus if you don't know anything about them, it's just facts. It's a lot easier to dislike somebody.
Well, and if you highlight one part of your, think of one day of your life or one thing that you've gone through, and if that was the only thing everyone knew, instead of adding all of the nuance and all of the ins and outs, we're all good and bad, right? We all have good in us and bad in us, and what constant struggle for what's going to take over and win. And our founders and all those who came before us are the exact same as we are.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
I found it interesting too. I don't know if you looked at some of the titles of some of those books as we were going through the library. I was just curious, what are these people? You made the comment, what are these brilliant men reading, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I picked up on was they read a lot of historical books on like the history of Greece, and so they were studying the history of other countries and civilizations. Because they were setting up this nation, I would assume they're trying to go, okay, we got to make sure this nation's set up properly and is going to withstand everything it needs to withstand over the coming years.
Yeah, I think it's a good lesson just using critical thinking, right? Because that is, when I went into the library, I was taking pictures of what the books were because I want to know, what are they reading? What do men that have become the president of the greatest country in the world, what did they read to start thinking the way they think and then to create this incredible place we get to live, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, it is, I think, important that as people, we continue to use critical thinking based on the information we're getting and continuously trying to get more, right? Continuously trying to read more and learn more so that we can make a good decision. A lot of us are trying to make decisions based on our emotions or how we feel at any given time, which usually doesn't lead us to a good result. We see children do that all the time. They make decisions when they're emotional. And to adults, it just looks dumb, right? You're like, why would you act like that? But I feel a lot of adults do the same thing, not realizing it's the same behavior as their child.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go
ahead.
That's okay.
I mean, if you talk about that, and then I wanted to go another direction.
Yes, no, I was just going to say that they took the Bible, Greek and Roman history, they took all of that and, like you said, critically thought and what's going to work, what's not going to work. Obviously, kings, anyone you give any power to is going to take over. You've got to turn it to the people.
In addition to that, it was they knew that it wasn't going to be perfect to begin with, so created a framework in which it could be improved upon over time, knowing that nobody's perfect enough to get it right the first time.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, maybe we should start back to where the Pilgrims began because they didn't necessarily, where they were currently living before they came here to America, they were actually free already, right? Now, they left a place where they were in bondage, but before they came here, I would like you to maybe just talk about that a little bit, about why they came. Was it
Holland?
Leiden, Holland. And they left a place where they were already free, but they had a
calling.
I guess a calling, something that burned within them. It says, we've got to go and get to America. I would say it was America at the time, but you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So they did leave England, and that was true. So I think that's what I learned growing up in school. We did learn they were escaping religious persecution. They were separatists because they wanted to be separate from the king. They believed a little bit different. But they did escape to Holland, and there's a whole story with that. But they were living in Leiden and they were doing quite well. They had actually a little congregation, about 300 people, and Pastor John Robinson, I think was his name. And they were all looked at in Leiden as a great little group because they were industrious, they were hard workers, they were doing all good things. But
by the way, as you're talking about this, I want people to think of it this way. Was it 50 million descendants of
30 million.
30 million
John
of just
Howell.
one of them.
Yeah, John Howell.
But chances are, you have a direct descendant that came from these people.
Yes.
So that might help people actually pay attention to this. Go, these are my great grandparents, and without them, I would not be here. And that's something that I've made a connection with more in recent years. That's helped me go, man, this is really cool. I felt a connection out there, a spiritual connection. This is my blood. This is where I came from.
Yep.
So anyway, sorry to cut you off, but I think that might help people go, maybe I better tune into this a little bit more and pay attention to this.
This is your family history. It just is. And if it's not, it's your nation's history, which was extremely important as well. So yes, they were in Leiden. And one thing that I thought was interesting that they didn't love is some things their kids were learning, like the Sabbath day wasn't being observed in Holland and things like that they didn't love. There was a pending war with Spain, and there was a few things that it was like, okay, maybe things aren't perfect, but not enough to like get on a boat and go into
Risk
the middle
their
of
lives.
nowhere. Yes, absolutely. So one of the only explanations is they truly felt that they were called to go and do it. And what I believe is, I don't need to get into all of it, but that they are descendants of the tribes of Israel that were scattered years before, and they were foreordained to come to America and found it on Christian biblical principles.
Yep.
So they did. They were actually supposed to get on a smaller boat, and at last minute were able to board the Mayflower, which I thought was really cool. The Mayflower is named after the hawthorn plant, which is called the Mayflower, that they believed that when Christ was in the atonement, that a drop of blood fell, and a hawthorn plant is what came up. And so, I mean, they didn't name the ship, that's what it was named. And so I think they probably felt that was a good omen. You know?
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think that the resolve these people had, I believe this with everything in me. They knew it was God's will. They understood the Bible. They understood that they were the children of Israel. They were descendants of them, and they were to cross over the wall, which is the ocean, to get to the promised land. And so they understood this is God's will. That's number one. But number two, they knew it, right? I mean, it's one thing to do God's will, and people go, what's God's will? Well, I believe anything that's positive and good and doing good is God's will.
Right.
The power comes in is when we recognize it's God's will. And when that happens, the reason that's when miracles happen and when we're unstoppable is because when you understand and know God and you know He's on your side, what could ever stop you from succeeding?
Right.
You might go through trials, you might go through challenges, but you are they almost bounce off of you in a way because you know. So you got to do God's will, and then I think just as important, you got to know it's God's will. Yeah. So many of you out there are doing God's will right now, but do you recognize that you're doing God's will? And that'll help give you power. So yeah, that's awesome.
Can I add another thing about Leiden that's really cool?
Yes.
Is John Adams went back. We were speaking about John Adams earlier. He went back to Leiden when he was trying to raise money for the Revolutionary War. And he went back there and walked the streets of his ancestors and wept. And he went before the governments there and said, this story is your story. The American dream is your guys' story as well. And because of that, they helped fund the war, the Revolutionary War. So.
Wow.
How awesome.
Really cool.
So how many people? 102 people got on the Mayflower. Is that right?
Yes. And not all of them were, maybe half of them, I think, were the, what we would deem the pilgrims, like the separatists. Mm-hmm. And the other half, they were called strangers, which was just people that just happened to want to go as well, but they didn't believe
Yeah, they
the
weren't
same as
seeking
Yes.
religious freedom or this dream of setting up a society based on their beliefs, right? They were just along for the ride.
Yep. Yeah, and so I mean, I think some cool stories happened as they were on their way here as well, right? I mean, you imagine how many months were they on the ocean?
66 days.
66 days, right? I can't even imagine, and you're basically at the mercy of the wind and the waves and the tides. And
I think another interesting thing is that if you look at the Mayflower, it's not that big.
No.
Right. And there's 102 people plus crew, right? So this is just 102 guests, but they have crew too. So the guests are not allowed to go
above deck.
Above deck because they get in the way of the sailors, right?
Yes. Yeah. So we know of one passenger on there, John Howland.
This is a cool story. So we've known, I'll let you tell it, or Jeff can tell it, but so we've known for a few years that you're a descendant of John Howland, but when we were on the trip, we found out Kelsey is too. So that's pretty great.
Pretty wild, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So John Howland, he was basically just a young boy. He was he was an indentured servant, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he wanted to get out and get a breath of fresh air middle of the night one night, which you're not supposed to do, but he did. He's probably a little rebellious, maybe, I don't know. And got up on deck, and a wave came and brushed him off the ship. Right. So he goes overboard, middle of the night, pitch black, freezing cold water. He would have died in 4 minutes. That's how cold the water was. As he got brushed off, one of the crew members saw him, and he fell off into the ocean, and one of the ropes was dangling in from
halyard that runs a sail.
Okay, yeah.
That should never be in the water, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
They shouldn't be hanging down.
No.
He happens to grab up and grab a hold of this rope. Miracle, right? And one of the crew members see him and grab that rope and pull him in. Okay, so this is wild because John Howland has 30 million descendants now in the United States of America. And had that not happened, and very important people, I think 4 U.S. presidents came from him, right? We're LDS, so Joseph Smith and Emma Smith, both were direct descendants. Kelsey, your wife, was a direct descendant.
Yeah.
So some very important people, and then thousands and thousands and thousands. I mean, all 30 million are important people, but
yes,
it's pretty amazing to see when those kind of things happen. You go, okay, how else do you explain that? That is a complete miracle.
Right.
That
what blows me away is that these things happen. They had this much impact on the modern world, and yet people try to erase this story that is really so important for so many of the same people trying to erase the story.
Yes.
It's like they don't realize they're erasing themselves.
Exactly.
And what is important. And yeah, cool story. But yeah, I think as they go across, another thing that really is 102 people got on. 2 babies were born on the way over, right? So 104 people. But then the first winter, what happened is half of them died, right? Because of starvation.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think what's significant about that is, again, just going back to their resolve, they didn't come here for themselves. Everything that the Pilgrims were doing was to set up a civilization for their children, their grandchildren, next generation. And one of the reasons why our nation's been so successful the last 200 plus years is because that's been the focus primarily.
Yes. And I think that is not only said, but we know it's a fact because of the actions that they took that first winter, right? Which I think, Lexee, you probably have good insight to. I think there was 18 married women, is that right? 14 of them died, giving the food to their kids,
to their children. Yes. Something else that I was thinking when you said half of them died, they actually all would have died if they wouldn't have landed right where they landed, which they were trying to go further south. They're trying to go more like Jamestown.
Yeah.
And they kept getting blown off course. And so they end up where they end up. And some cool things that happened prior was, there's so many miracles. I'm just trying to even think of where to start. First of all, when they get there, there's corn already planted. Yeah. Like corn there, or else they for sure would have died. Something else that was interesting is we all know Squanto, right? We know that name Squanto.
Yep.
And Samoset and Massasoit. These are some of the names of the Indians that were there. Squanto had been actually kidnapped at one point and sold as a slave and had gone back. And in that time learned English. So he escaped and made it back to America. And because of that, he knew English and what he'd been through. He comes back, and his whole settlement, all of his tribe had been killed. And so he's there with his tribe is gone. A lot of people thought that area was cursed because everyone had died there, but that's why that corn was still there. And Squanto, who actually taught them how to plant, how to use dead fish to help the corn grow better. A lot of different things like that he helped. And help them not be wiped out by the other Indian tribes.
Because it was the plague, I think, that they got, right? They got the plague, and that's how his tribe got wiped out.
Yes.
And then the fish is a cool story because all these fish come up this river, they call it, which is really more like a stream.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's a river, and it's full of fish in the springtime. And so he teaches them how to use that to fertilize the soil and grow better crops.
Yes. So they land
cool.
where there's spring water. I mean, there's just, I'm trying to think of what else. I had a couple other things.
Yeah, there's like 9 springs of fresh water that are still running today that you can go drink from right now as we walked through it, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
It's cool.
So William Bradford called Squanto, he called him a special instrument of God and knew it was the powerful hand of God that protected them. So
Yeah, and who was William Bradford?
he's my great-great-grandfather, but he ended up being technically the second governor of Plymouth, but the first governor died that first winter.
Yeah.
So he ended up being the governor for was it 30 years, which is
I think
kind of
a long time.
time.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah, so he being the governor of Plymouth Plantation to kind of show this is why we built our settlement this way. And it was after the Geneva Bible that they carried across with them.
Right. I think a story about that too is what was interesting to me is in school we learned that the Indians and the Pilgrims lived near each other, and they talk about this river. And I was telling Brandon, in our minds when we learn about it, you imagine this river and you imagine it being like far away, not realizing they literally lived together because this river that is talked about is a foot wide, right, or maybe 2 feet wide.
Yep, not very big, yeah.
So they lived together, right, and chose to do that. They weren't trying to live separately. They had the ability to do that, but yet they chose to live together.
They actually formed a treaty that was in place for, was it 55 years?
51.
51 years. It was the longest treaty in history of continual
Like
peace.
natives and
Between natives and, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that, you hear a lot of the stories. I mean, we had a great guide named Leo. What's Leo's last name?
Leo Martin.
Leo Martin, which if you ever go back there, he's a great guide to have.
Amazing, yeah.
Very good.
He might be the only one that will tell you
The truth.
the true story.
Yeah, and he's getting old, so you got to get out there soon if you want to have him guide you through there. But he told multiple stories, and I don't remember all these details, but just of how the Pilgrims served the Indians and nursed them back to health when they got sick, and just did so many things that because they wanted that relationship.
Yeah, isn't that the story about William Bradford nursing back to health Massasoit?
So it was Edward Winslow was his name.
Oh,
but
Edward
yes.
Winslow. Okay. And so, can you tell that story?
Yeah, because we try to remember.
Yeah, I mean, I try to remember how the story goes, but I can't.
So by the way, these books here. So Lexee has a Mayflower book by a guy
Nathaniel
named
Philbrook.
Nathaniel Philbrook that she has probably read 500 times. No. And then one called The Pilgrim Hypothesis by Tim Ballard, and she knows these things really well. So a lot of this stuff comes from, those are a couple of the books.
Yes, those are great books.
You have a library like John Adams right next to our bed. Like she has her bedside table. I'm serious. There's probably like 30 books that are like all being read at the same time.
That's awesome. Because you need reference back and forth. What happened?
I don't, and then I just can't decide to I start reading one and I'm like love it, and then it'll mention another one, and then I order that one and start reading that one before I finish that one. I just can't.
I digress. I'm sorry.
Well, I think this is an important story because I think most people, including myself, before I got there, always imagined that it was hostile from day one, not realizing there was genuine love for these different people that lived together, chose to live together, and they lived not only in peace, but they thrived because of each other and saved each other's lives intentionally. So I think that story with Edward Winslow and Massasoit is cool.
Yeah, Massasoit was the actual Indian chief, and so no one really knows why he didn't wipe him out. He totally could have, and they said it's just by the grace of God. So they were able to communicate through, Squanto and these other Indians that did speak English. But yes, he got really, really sick. And Edward Winslow, which I need to study a little bit more about Edward Winslow. But he walked, I can't remember how many miles that he walked to go and spent. And on the way there, he found out someone had told him, no, Massasoit's already passed away. He still ventured on, gets to his settlement, and he spends the next multiple days nursing him back to health.
Yeah, I think it was 40 miles. I could be wrong,
Was it
but I thought it was 40 miles. I remember
Okay.
thinking, dang, it would
That's
take a long
way.
time to walk that far.
And he continued to go after he was told he was dead too, which was good. He did.
Yeah,
because
he kept going and then saved his life.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Yeah, very good. Very good. Man, there's so many things we could talk about. I was just going through some.
I was just thinking too, when Jeff's saying you picture certain things in your mind, I think there's a reason why we need to go to a place, right?
Yes.
Going to the place, we can read about it, and as I read, I'm just like, I love it, but I want to go to the place where it happened, because something happens to you when you are there. And I don't know if it's because the spirit of the people is still there and, wants their story told. Whatever it is, there's a reason why we feel drawn to go to the place. And as you're there, it's different than just reading about it.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I was just going through my pictures here because one of the things that really just, again, stood out to me was just the focus of setting up the next generation. Society. And so we went and saw what is called the statue of
the Monument to the Forefathers.
Monument to the Forefathers. And there were, I'm just going through my pictures here. There was a few main things they focused on: faith, morality,
education,
law,
and liberty.
And liberty, right?
Law and liberty. Mm-hmm.
And education.
So, education.
Education.
Yep.
So, if you want, do you want to go through each of them a little bit and talk about what they were? Or
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think it's powerful. If you see this monument, I mean, you see it, and it's, I don't know how tall he said it stood. Something like 80 feet tall.
It was supposed to be 160 feet.
Right.
But they ran out of money.
Yeah.
But 80 feet's pretty tall.
Yeah.
And it's in the middle of a neighborhood. Like, it's so interesting, huh? You walk and it just feels a little bit more powerful because you're kind of by these small homes, and then it just rises above everything.
Yep. It sits up on this little hill overlooking Plymouth and where the Mayflower would have landed originally, right? Mm-hmm. It's awesome.
So what does this monument stand for, Lex? What are some things that we need to take away from that?
Okay, so a couple things. I just have my notes because there is a lot to it. But one thing that I really liked is some of the statues are, the very, very top is faith. So some of them are female, some of them are male. So they have different purposes and different meanings. And I loved what he said. The women stand for the internal things like the faith, the education, and the men stand for the external, which is law, liberty, which I think is really cool to show the different roles that men and women do play.
Well, I think that's a big point too that I really learned on this trip, is that modern society almost makes you think that men that long ago treated women as, less than or not an important part of society. And then when you go there and you see the way society was set up, you realize that it was very intentional to honor women and honor their roles that they played. It was just dramatically different than the picture we've been taught, right? Yes. Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because the roles have changed, which I don't think have helped society by any means.
Right.
I think there's a reason why these 51 people could thrive and build an incredible society and grow to what America has become today and has continuously grown. There's always been challenges. But as that concept has kind of disappeared, as they've taken God out of things and they've changed the roles of men and women in society, it definitely has had a negative impact on society, right?
Yes. So Faith stands at the top. She's the very top and the tallest, and that's what you see first. So she's standing on Plymouth Rock. Her foot's on Plymouth. She's holding a Geneva Bible under her arm, right? What did he say about the
pages are blowing because that's the Spirit.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as you read the Bible, and then the Spirit speaks back to you.
Yeah.
And so it was their way of saying, we actually can receive our own personal revelation. We don't have to receive it from the king, because the king was the one who was saying,
he thought he was God.
Exactly.
Which is the whole reason they left to begin with, to seek this religious freedom, was, where the King James Bible comes from, right? Yes. He wanted it written so that he was God. They had to seek him for answers. And that they had realized.
And it was interesting because when he got a hold of the Bible, he wanted it translated his way, but it got intercepted by
the same company that had printed the Geneva Bible to begin with.
So they kept it more accurate and didn't change it the way King James. Is kind of funny, and he didn't know, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, they basically just took out the study notes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Yes. Okay, and then her right hand, is there her right hand pointing to the sky?
Yes.
Right.
To always remember God. So so that's faith at the very top. Let's see. Is there anything else you want to talk about her? She has a star on her forehead, which was to stand for the honor of intelligence and education. And then they have a whole statue for education, but that's the star on her forehead is for intelligence. The passenger list of all the passengers of the Mayflower listed on both sides of the statue.
Yep.
As you come down, let's see. So the next one is law, and this is shown as a man sitting there, and they say we're all equal under the law. All men are made in the image of God. That includes the Pilgrims, the Indians, everyone. So everyone will be created equal under the law.
And this was so important to them because in the society they had lived in, the king made the laws and then broke his own laws, so he was above the law. So he would make laws for everybody else, but he didn't have to follow his own. So he was always above it. So they wanted to create a society where nobody was above the law. It was equal for everybody, right?
And they knew that is the way of man since the beginning of time, right? That's just what happens. So I like how he said he has a stern look on his face, which is the justice, but he had a soft hand up like mercy.
Yeah.
So he had the justice and the mercy. Punishment always fits the crime. I think you liked some of the stories he told about the punishments. Is that the...
Yeah, I can't remember. He told a lot of great stories. I can't remember
the
now.
pillory. Remember who went in the pillory? It wasn't the kids. It was the parents.
The parents.
Remember the
Yeah,
parents?
yeah.
That was
That was
gonna,
good.
Yeah, mention that today. Talk about that because that's kind of
You
interesting.
guys, go ahead. You two talk about that because that is. I thought that was really. You guys laughed at that one. You thought that was pretty great.
It's because I think about how my kids act up sometimes, and I'd probably be in that thing all the time.
We are not leaving the house. Yes.
I mean, they took it so seriously that your kids better behave because if they misbehave, you go in the what do you call it?
The pillory.
The pillory, which is where your hands and
Yeah, I think everybody has seen those things where like they put the over your hand in your head, right?
yes,
So,
and you had to stay there all day.
Yep.
And Leo said the bad part is that's what they do to the parents all day, but then the problem is the parents got let out at night and then they went and talked to their kids, right?
Yep.
And you look at that about how much more you'd probably focus on teaching good behavior
Correctly.
to your children and correcting them in private, so when they get in public they don't misbehave. I mean, it was so I'm sure there was pretty well behaved kids back then. I would imagine.
Yeah, the parents were the ones punished for for children acting out because ultimately it is our responsibility as parents, right? And I think too often in society, and I think this comes back to both men and women working outside the home, where it was like me, but my mom was always working. I just do whatever I wanted, right? And so that has kind of changed in the world where if there was a responsibility put on the parents for the way the children acted, then I think parents would act a lot different. But I think as time goes on, you watch parents get mad at teachers for teachers wanting their children to act good in class or work hard or whatever it may be. And you see these parents backing their children rather than backing the people trying to influence their lives and help them stick through some discipline. And yeah, maybe it's uncomfortable. Maybe there is some rigidity or whatever it may be that you have to stick by. But ultimately, that's what creates a better society, because if kids don't learn when they're young, it just gets worse when they get older, right?
Yep.
And how can you have a great society of people who get older and don't know how to treat each other?
Yep. Boundaries and principles keep us safe and protected as we get older, right? All throughout our entire lives. If we don't set those early on for our children and we allow them to go outside of those parameters when they're young, then they get an entitlement attitude. We get an entitlement attitude as we get older, and we don't learn.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and obviously we can never force our children to be good, but the more that we're teaching them correct principles from that Bible that they carried across was the point.
Right.
I like how he said, he did say the punishment fit the crime. He talked about those two guys that got into a fight, and so their punishment was to be tied together, right?
Yeah,
Their
I think.
wrists.
Yeah, did they get in a fist fight or was it a duel? 'Cause didn't they
I think it
duel
was
back then?
bad. Yeah, I think it was
a duel.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it was a bad. Yeah, it was a bad deal.
Then
But
they tied them together until they
Agreed not to
said
do that
sorry,
anymore.
and
Yes.
we'll never get in trouble again.
Yeah. In a painful position, right? But tied together in a painful. Their hands tied together
behind their
and their
back.
feet tied together.
Yeah, so as they got tired, they would lean forward and pull up
And
on their
pull.
shoulders.
So they never had a problem again.
Yeah, never. Well, I mean,
why don't we bring some of
With
this
those
stuff back
people,
today?
I know.
seriously.
I mean,
because people get their feelings hurt,
Man.
and yeah, that's what it is. And they feel like they should be able to act however they want.
I mean, that's better than prison,
Yeah.
It is.
Teach them and allow them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there should be something. And back then to that point, they didn't have prison. So they had to use punishment that would keep the behavior of society the way that they needed it to be, right? Because this was an experiment that was going to free the world.
Yes.
And they knew it, right? They didn't take it lightly. I think a lot of times people just think this was some sort of experiment that they hoped would work. No, they knew it was going to work. It was ordained by God, and so they took it as a responsibility, not just for their life, but it was generational impacts. It was going to impact every single person that in the future, and it had never been done before. I mean, think about the responsibility, and yet today, I mean, you see how soft people are, and this is why they take it away. It allows people to have control when you realize that, no, the people that have fought for us to get to this point and what they went through for our life to be this good, right? Imagine how good it could be if we continued to carry on those same principles, standing on the shoulders of the people that came before us,
No kidding.
To me, it just makes sense, but it's uncomfortable.
And William Bradford's quote on the backside of the monument actually does show that they knew they were being a light to the world and trying to push this forward for future generations. But it says, thus, out of small beginnings, greater things have been produced by his hand that made all things of nothing and gives being to all things that are. And as one small candle may light 1,000, so the light here kindled has shone unto many, yea, in some sort of our whole nation. Let the glorious name of Jehovah have all the praise. Governor William Bradford.
Amazing.
Really good.
Yep.
Okay. Education.
So the
Or what do you want to do next?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Education. The woman. This one was talking about. Let's see here. She's holding a Bible as well, which they called the Book of Knowledge.
Which is what they used to teach.
Yes.
I think that's an important thing. Every single person in this country whose family comes from this country generationally, everyone's education originated from the Bible. Everyone. 100%. How cool is that?
Very cool. That's way cool. They had youth on one side and ancestors on the other. So the parents were to bring up their children and then use the wisdom of the elders. So you taught the youth from the Bible, and then you got the wisdom from the elders, which were the grandparents.
That's good. I mean, all just great foundational. If we just keep these things as our foundation, man, our nation would continue to be the best, strongest nation in the world.
Imagine if this was school.
Yep.
Right? Imagine if school was taught these things. Like the next one, I think, I don't know, Lex, if you come to, is morality. Right?
Yeah.
Like, which, I mean, I just think about it. If we just taught these concepts every day and our kids grew up, including us, right? I think we learn these things through, desire or, I guess what happens to us through life, but it definitely isn't taught to us unless it's from someone in our family or we go seek it out ourselves. But wouldn't it be nice if society just taught us these things?
It would. It would.
Yeah, so the moral was an internal, right? That was a female, because the morality, teaching the morals and standards and values.
Yes.
Good.
And then the last one was liberty.
Hey, by the way, real quick, liberty. What's the difference between liberty and freedom? I know there's I've heard, I'm trying to remember how it goes, but people seek liberty. That's what they're seeking for. We want freedom, but they're the same, but they're different too. But I was asking you guys because I was hoping you had the answer.
Oh, I was waiting for
I was waiting for a punchline.
No,
Yeah.
no.
I was waiting for like one of those.
I want to have the punchline, and there is one. I
Yeah.
just can't remember it.
Yeah. Yeah, I
We'll
don't
look
know.
that up and
I
come
will.
back to
I'll
it on
look it up
part
right
2.
now.
Okay, yeah.
Should we do that?
That's
You're
fine.
going to look it up, Jeff?
Yeah,
the
I'm gonna
difference
look it
between
up.
liberty and freedom?
Yes.
That's fine. I thought
Do we
for sure.
think that freedom is the freedom to do whatever we want, and liberty is doing, let's see, I don't know, like following the laws and like having, I don't know. I'm trying to think.
I think you're on the right track there.
Okay.
Here, liberty entails the responsible use of freedom under the rule of law without depriving anyone else of their freedom.
Very good. So that's the difference, right? Freedom, you do whatever you want because you're free.
Yes.
Liberty is constrained to the right.
Responsible use of freedom.
There you go.
Well, it would be like someone who
I'm glad we have Google. I always forget we have Google.
I know.
If you have a question, just look it up.
Serious. What if there was a website you could just ask any question and tell you the answer?
Yeah.
So you think about like an alcoholic, they might have the freedom to drink whenever they want, but do they have liberty? Are they truly?
Are they using their freedom for responsible or taking responsibility for that freedom and using it,
Okay,
in a
I feel
wise way?
fulfilled now. I opened up a can of worms
good,
there,
that
and then
was
I was a little afraid.
Without the answer.
Without the answer.
It's all right. We'll
Thanks,
find
Jeff,
it.
for pulling that together.
What else you have for
If
us
it's
on
not in
liberty?
my notes, I don't know.
I thought for sure it would be in your notes.
Did I write that? Nope.
That's funny.
Oh my gosh. So Liberty was the muscle guy, right?
Yep.
He had all the muscles. He had on a breastplate, a helmet, and a sword, but the sword was in its sheath, which
Yes.
means more defensive position. You're not going to the problem, but you will defend it as needed.
Yeah, more peaceful time it
Yes.
symbolizes. They're
And the
not
battle
currently
had been
at.
won. Like the battle for coming to America had been won. And then a lion draped over his shoulder, which stood for tyranny or Satan, as they believed in. That's what it stood for. So the lion, I guess it would be a lion's paw, like they'd slayed the lion.
Yeah, like they had killed the lion, skinned it, and then he was wearing it.
And he was
as
wearing it.
Yeah.
Yes. They'd broken the chains of tyranny and had peace. And he was also
And on one left side of the statue is tyranny, the right side is peace. Did you say that already?
Nope. I
So
didn't.
there were two, yeah. And by the way, each of these pillars have two words on each side of this that kind of
Yes.
balance all of this out.
Yes.
Sorry, keep going.
No, that's great. So one thing that I was reading this morning, trying to get in the frame of mind, because we're on this high out there, it's so great, and then we come home and Brandon, asked me to join today, so I was trying to get in the frame of mind. But 10 years after this experiment, I guess they knew that it would work, but of self-rule, capitalism, land ownership. The Massachusetts Bay Colony had arrived, and they went to visit them, and they were struggling because they were still under appointing, had more of a king rulership, right? So, oh my gosh, Samuel Fuller, he went to them and he said, "You got to knock it off. You got to give the people the power and elect somebody to rule here," and they turned it around. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it was interesting too to hear the take on land ownership and how it started, right? Because what happened at first is when the Mayflower landed, they had that hard first winter. They had a little bit of corn. Most of the mothers died, giving their food to their children and passing on to the next generation and keeping them alive. And then as they started thriving, they started having communal gardens and communal housing, and they lived together and they worked together. The problem is that some people were lazy and they weren't working hard. They went from known as this industrious, hardworking people to one generation later were lackadaisical, lazy, and really putting the entire country at risk, I guess, if you call them a country at that point. But and so what they decided to do is that they were going to separate the land, and based on how many children you had, and they would give you a certain piece of land, and so that you could work that land and provide for your own family, and you could provide as much or as little as you wanted. And then families started providing more than they needed and selling other places so that they can make some extra money.
They created an incentive, capitalism, right? William Bradford got all that organized and made that.
Yep, it's kind of where that concept was born, was solving the solution of communal living, which I think people a lot of times today, they think it sounds nice, right? Oh, communal living. It's already happened, right? We already know what happens when you do that. It's already happened. It's proven. It almost cost us our country at the very beginning. And land ownership, if people wonder why are people so crazy about land ownership, because if you realize the history of it, why it's so important, what it allows you to do, you understand that there's not really, when it comes to a free country or a free enterprise system, that there's not much more important than land ownership.
No question.
In a perfect world, it could work that way, right? But
Yes.
we've still got that struggle of natural man in us, and it just,
Yeah, as long as people procrastinate, communal living will not work.
Very true.
Right? It's what happens. You can't procrastinate when you're farming and hope that good things happen.
Yeah.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Very true.
Anything else on the statue?
No, I'm good on statue.
Okay. Should we talk about Boston going through the Freedom Trail?
Yeah, the Freedom Trail is awesome.
It's cool. Huh?
I highly suggest.
But first, where did we stay?
Oh, we stayed in an awesome hotel. It was called the Liberty.
You watched the documentary on that. What was the Liberty? I watched some of it. But
I did watch a documentary on it. It was a former jail that was a pretty famous jail, mainly because a group of guys that had this famous Brinks robbery. They robbed $1.6 million, which back then was a ton of money. And he was there. Malcolm X served time there. So there was a lot of pretty well-known people that served time in this jail. And they shut it down for a lot of years, and then it was purchased. And then they renovated this jail and turned it into a 5-star hotel. And it's pretty cool now because they have restaurants in there like called Clink, which they use some of the old jail cells. And actually there's 22 rooms in that hotel that are actually formal or previously jail cells. So if you stay in the original part, there's 22 rooms that were jail cells. And then we stayed in the newer part that they built on. But really cool history of the jail. Yeah,
no, it really was. Really was. So yeah, the Freedom Tour was really cool. There was a lot of things we saw along that. I'll share one of the things that stuck out to me. There's a lot of them, so pick any one of them. But there was a section there where you walk through some glass pillars, and these glass pillars have numbers, thousands of numbers, and it's all of the people that died in concentration camps during World War II.
Yep.
And at the end of it, this was a saying at the end that I thought was just hit me, And Jeff, you talked about reading the book The Choice.
Yes.
Which is, I just started reading that too, really good. Anyway, I just want to read this. So it says, this is talking about that event, right, of the Holocaust. So it says, they came first for the communists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't speak up because I was a Protestant. Then they came for me, and by that time, no one was left to speak up. And gives me chills thinking about that, of how important it is that we continue to educate and get the word out of what's happening in our world, and all these, what we're talking about today.
And most importantly, stand up for what you believe in. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, because I think I'm pretty outspoken. I've never been one to shy away from the things I stand for. I'm not scared to offend anybody, I never do it intentionally because I know that my beliefs are different than other people's, and I'm okay with them having different beliefs than me. It doesn't threaten me because I'm very confident in my own. But one of the things that, man, it drives me crazy is people will send me a message and go, I'm so glad that you're speaking out about this. Someone needs to. I can't because of ... whatever that is. People over and over and over and over. And it's like whatever that is after that ... is the epitome of that quote, what they're trying to tell you. At some point, you've got to be willing to stand up and go, okay, enough's enough. You're watching what's happening right now with social media. People are being banned because they're standing up for strong men. I mean, think about how scary that is. I mean, there's been people like Jordan Peterson. Come on, because he tells the truth and it hurts your feelings. Or maybe it's not the truth to you, but it just hurts your feelings, so you want him gone. So imagine this world where you get rid of everybody who doesn't agree with you because it hurts your feelings. I mean, that sounds like a dictatorship to me, right? And so really where at some point it's your responsibility to stand up and say, okay, enough's enough. Even I might disagree with them, but I believe that not only should they have the right to, but they should stand up for what they believe in.
Yeah, I think it's a big indication of you don't know who you are yet if you're having a hard time standing up for what you believe, right?
Yeah.
You're maybe finding yourself as a people pleaser. You're maybe putting your worth off of someone else's opinion. And that's where you got to do some work. You got to do some work on who are you? What do you really believe? What do you really stand for?
Yeah, and I would say that the people that are because what happens a lot of time, you see strong people, right, that have these beliefs. And I think a lot, the stuff we saw in Boston, there's factual information you learn and you go, I know why my belief is the way it is. And there are people that are threatened and they almost get confrontational because of your belief. But it tells you, the people that get confrontational is because they feel attacked, they feel threatened, right? And people feel threatened when they're insecure, right? So when you're unsure and you're insecure, you're going to feel threatened and you're going to enter this confrontational mode where that's your only response is to confront what makes you uncomfortable rather than being confident in your understanding and your belief of what you know is true.
Yeah,
right?
true. That's
and
good.
I think in American history, it's important we go back, whether you're from America or not. My grandpa came here during World War II on a boat. And we came my family got here for a dramatically different reason, maybe than your family or Kelsey's family, right? But at the end of the day, we all came seeking the same thing. And the more I learn about American history, the more it makes me proud that I get the opportunity to live in this country. But it also makes me feel like I have a responsibility to just say something, right? To just be, at least vocal about the truth.
Well, I've heard it said that the most important thing you can do is speak that truth, spread the gospel, and then the second most important thing is to make sure you can do the first thing.
Right.
So we have to preserve that, or else we won't have that. It will be taken away from us.
Yeah, and if you're hiding from it and you're not, you're scared to post on social media, or you're scared to bring something up in front of a family member, or you don't say something, I almost think you're just as much the problem, right? Even if your beliefs are the opposite. It's like, all right, strong people that are telling the truth need people to stand with them. Imagine about these separatists, right? They left to Holland and they had a group of people. There was a lot of people that maybe had the same beliefs that could have been a part of this great American story. But instead, nobody will ever know who they were, and probably their family has lived dramatically different, lives, and simply because they at least had the courage to stand up and do what was right. And we'll forever tell their stories because of that, which is cool.
Oh, it's good. Good. What did you like about the Freedom Tour?
Oh, I don't know.
Anything that stood out? Or one of the things you
Ask
liked?
Jeff next. I don't know. There's too many things. Let me think here.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I thought, this is kind of off the topic of all this stuff, but I just thought it was cool how we started this tour with Richie. Is that his name? Richie, our guide?
Yeah.
Awesome guy. And he showed us this map of Boston, and it was all water. I'm like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that maybe the majority of Boston used to be ocean.
Yes.
Somehow they brought in all that dirt to build all these big buildings. We'd be walking along the Freedom Trail, and he'd go, yeah, people used to fish right there. I'm like, there ain't no fish there.
Yep.
That's land.
Yep.
Anyway, I thought that was just a fun fact. I thought that was really cool to be walking the streets of Boston and go, man, this was 30, 40 feet underwater or more.
Yeah. How much the landscape has changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they've just continued to grow.
Yep.
I think one of the cool things for me was going and seeing the grave sites of some of these incredible people who have shaped our history. And then seeing, I mean, not only being there, but then seeing their family and their kids buried there, and then their belief and their faith, right? That it was a common thing, for example, that they would bury them facing Israel. Like how cool. And then the writing on their tombstone would be on the other side. So it'd be on the opposite side, which I guess would have been the west side, right? And so it was just interesting to think about that even the graveyard was intentionally set up for faith, right? To showcase the reason that this country was being built.
Yeah, we saw Paul Revere's gravesite, right? Saw Ben Franklin's parents' gravesite.
Yep. Samuel Adams.
Samuel Adams. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah, it was. It was awesome.
Good.
Paul Revere's house.
Paul Revere's house.
Yeah.
We did see
Just
that.
in the middle of the city.
And we saw where John F. Kennedy's mother was born.
John F. Kennedy or John Adams?
John F. Kennedy's, right?
Was it John F. Kennedy?
Yeah.
John F. Kennedy's
John F.
mother was
Kennedy,
born,
okay.
along one of those. Where
that
the bird
one,
pup pooped on you.
Yeah, I got crapped on by a bird right in front of that house.
You did. Yeah, how was the
That's why
sign?
you couldn't remember where we were.
I'm trying to forget about that place already.
Anyway,
That's funny.
well, anything else you want to cover today? I know, Jeff, you got to get going here.
No, I think that one of the things I would like to cover before we go is John Adams' house. I know we talked about it at the beginning.
Let's do. Yeah,
but it is mind-boggling how, honestly, I told Kelsey, we live better today. Like the average middle-class American lives better today than the president of the United States lived. Yeah, he had a second house, and you could say, oh, well, in comparison to everybody else. But in all reality, their home was very, very, very conservative. I mean, it was small. I mean, I don't know how many square feet you think it is. 2,000, 2,500?
Yeah, I mean, upstairs and downstairs. I would say it was 3,000 upstairs,
3,000?
downstairs. But there were a lot of rooms and a lot of people lived there.
Yes. Yeah, so I think...
Low ceiling. Like it feels very small,
Yeah,
claustrophobic.
Yes.
Yeah, it wasn't a big home by today's standards by any means. In fact, it was probably the average, size of a middle-class home that they're building in America today. And I was telling Kelsey, it surprised me because you go into these homes and you imagine, all right, here's the president of the United States, and you see the White House and stuff, and it was built a long time ago, but you walk through the home and you go, wow, like really it really is pretty conservative.
Very much.
Well, and he had to go back to being a farmer. Like
yes.
he served as president and then went back to his home and kept his farm going. It's not like he was given a salary for the rest of his life.
Which, if at all, right? It was voluntary, right?
Right.
So, yeah, politicians were volunteers.
Yes.
They're not volunteers today. They're careers.
Yes.
And how different was it that and that's another thing I think people need to remember is that these men at the time who were leading our country did it on a voluntary basis, were willing to risk everything they had, which a lot of them were very wealthy. And so they risked everything for free just because they felt this obligation and duty to serve. And
did it for us.
Yeah.
When it really comes down to it, right? Pilgrims, forefathers, they all did it. Everything they did was for us.
Yes.
I mean, they don't even, we were so far down their posterity, they don't even know us.
They, what's the saying? They planted trees which shade they would never sit under, right?
Yes.
That's what they did.
Yep.
I mean, George Washington was basically, they were like, please come and do this. And he was like, I did my job. They won the revolution. I want to just stay home in Mount Vernon. And he was asked multiple times. He's like, okay, I'll do it. I'll do it for the country that we're trying to set up here. So
yeah,
yep.
Yeah, it was a really cool trip. I'll just maybe end with this. This is actually John Adams' house. As you walk out of it, this is what he said. One of his quotes: "Let us dare to read, think, speak, and write." And that's really what it comes down to, right? Being bold enough to do all those things.
Yeah.
When we share this truth that we know with our children, our posterity, will be, bold enough to do that.
And he says, let us dare, right? Because we know that human nature is not to do those things, right? It takes effort to use our mind. It takes effort to go read. It takes effort to speak about those things. So he's saying, let us dare, right? It takes courage. And I think I love that as you're walking out of his house, it says that because, how of an important thing if we all lived our lives by that. Like, hey, remember just to dare to do these things.
Yep. Yeah. Well, good. Well, great podcast today. I if someone wants to read some good books, there's one that we picked up out there called, I think, was it How Many Miracles of the Revolution?
Yeah. The last name's Federer, right? No, not Federer. It was...
I think maybe William Federer.
Yeah, Bill Federer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. If you have any doubts that this nation was meant to be, read those miracles. It's I don't know, several of miracles in there.
Or go see these places. Right?
Yeah, even better.
Go there.
Go see them.
And yeah, what's it cost? I was telling Kelsey that I want to take our children back there because our kids need to see these things. And what's it cost? A few $1,000s? I'll bet it's cheaper than Disneyland.
Yeah.
And I'll bet a lot of people get more value out of it. Any child, maybe they're not going to be interested, but sure going to, and maybe they will be interested, but it's going to shape a child's life a lot more than seeing a mouse run around at a park will.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm just glad that the one thing that I have is that I don't know if it's a gift or what it is, but I love it so much, and I'm just so glad that you and Kelsey could come and experience that with us. And that
no kidding, we had a great time.
Brandon made the dream come true, huh?
I made it come true.
Yeah.
Well, I think it is a gift. It's a gift to me. So I don't know if it's a gift for you or not, but it's definitely a gift to me.
Might be the only one I have, but I'll take it.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, we had such a great time. I highly encourage anybody to go to Boston and go see those things and go on some tours and.
Yeah, absolutely. And any American history. There's so much on the East Coast there you can go see.
Yep.
A grateful heart.
Yeah.
It just makes your heart, just a grateful heart's really important.
It does. So yeah, algorithms are probably going to be all over this one just because we're trying to get truth out the best we can. So
did we mention God in this one, or
I don't know. Yeah.
Hopefully everyone will hear that.
Yeah. So like and share it if you would, and we appreciate you all listening and supporting us. And if you have any suggestions for us, reach out to us. A lot of you know how to get a hold of us through social media or whatever, and give us some comments on maybe what you'd like to see, what any guests you'd like us to have, and we'll keep moving. We'll keep this going, right?
Yes, sir.
All right.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
All right. Thanks, guys. Stay solid.